Eleanor sat at the kitchen table, the dim light from the single hanging bulb casting soft shadows across the room, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea that had long gone cold, and she felt the quiet weight of the house pressing in on her. A silence filled with memories of laughter and love that had faded since Thomas's passing 3 years ago. The air heavy with the smell of old wood and faint traces of the dinner she hadn't finished, the walls lined with photographs showing smiles that once lit up her life, and tonight the emptiness seemed louder than ever, until her grandson Leo, small and earnest, quietly stepped into the kitchen, his footsteps soft against the worn wooden floor, carrying with him a presence that both startled and comforted her. Swinging his legs gently as he pulled up a chair across from her, his dark eyes observing her face with an understanding that belied his age, noticing the way her shoulders slumped and the hollow look in her eyes, and in that moment, Eleanor felt a pang of guilt for the sadness she thought she could hide, yet Leo spoke first in a voice barely above a whisper, asking why she always looked so tired and sad when the evenings grew quiet. His question simple but carrying an innocent curiosity that pierced the heaviness surrounding her, and Eleanor, taken aback, hesitated, wanting to answer but unsure if words could carry the depth of her feelings, of years filled with love and grief intertwined, of the nights she had cried alone, while imagining Thomas walking beside her in the moonlight. And yet Leo continued, tilting his head slightly, his small hands resting on the table, waiting, not pressing but patiently urging her to share, and she finally exhaled a long breath, realizing that perhaps it was okay to let a little of herself spill out, to let someone see the fragility she had hidden for so long, and so she began to speak, telling him about Thomas, about the way they met under the summer sun in the park, how their laughter had echoed in the streets when the world felt full of possibility, how their hands had fit together perfectly, as if life itself had carved them to match, and how love had filled her life until his passing left an emptiness she thought she could never fill. Words flowing slowly at first and then faster, emotions spilling into the air as Leo listened intently, his small face serious, absorbing every syllable, nodding occasionally, asking soft questions that made her pause and reflect. Each answer bringing a new wave of emotion, a mixture of pain and warmth that reminded her that memory and love were intertwined, that grief did not erase the joy once experienced. And as the night deepened, Eleanor noticed something shift in the kitchen, the weight on her chest feeling lighter, the silence no longer oppressive but companionable, the shadows on the walls seeming softer, almost protective, and in that quiet exchange, between a grandmother and her grandson, a fragile bridge began to form, one built on words, trust, and the gentle realization that even after profound loss, connection could bring a glimmer of hope, a tiny spark that whispered that life still had room for warmth, for shared moments, and for the unexpected comfort found in a child's simple curiosity. As the clock ticked steadily in the background, marking the passage of time and the subtle healing that had quietly begun, a healing that would grow with each word, each glance, each pause, until the kitchen table, once a place of solitude and sorrow, became a place of understanding, of gentle care, and of the first hints of love rediscovered, showing Eleanor that even in the darkest corners of her heart, light could return, and the echo of Leo's quiet words lingered in her mind, carrying with it the promise of something beautiful yet to unfold. After that quiet evening at the kitchen table, Eleanor felt a small shift inside her heart, as if Leo's soft words had unlocked a door she had kept closed for years, and the following days were filled with a mixture of reflection and hesitant hope, each morning bringing her a strange anticipation, a sense that life might still hold gentle surprises. And one afternoon, while preparing tea for Leo, she found herself speaking more freely about Thomas, about the small joys they had shared, the walks in the park, the stolen kisses in the rain, the way he always knew how to make her laugh when the world felt heavy. And Leo listened with an attention that was almost adult, his small hands folded on the table, his eyes wide with quiet admiration, occasionally asking questions that made Eleanor pause and smile, realizing that in sharing her memories she was remembering the love that had shaped her life, the way her heart had been full and alive once. And then, unexpectedly, she noticed that even after loss, her own heart could feel something new stirring, a faint, thrilling flutter she had not expected. And just days later, as Eleanor walked through the local market, carrying a basket of fresh vegetables and bread for dinner, she spotted a familiar figure leaning against the old wooden fence near the bakery, a man named Samuel, someone she had not seen since their youth, and the sight of him stirred memories she had long buried, memories of laughter under sunlit skies, of conversations that had lasted for hours without notice of time passing, and though both had aged, their eyes met and recognized each other instantly, the warmth of familiarity mixing with the nervous excitement of seeing someone again after decades, and they exchanged cautious smiles at first, polite words masking the surge of unspoken feelings, yet beneath the surface, something tender and familiar began to bloom, as if the years had simply paused and now waited for them to reconnect. And Eleanor found herself thinking about him all the way home, feeling an emotion she thought was gone, a combination of longing and curiosity. And that evening, as she prepared dinner while Leo did his homework, she replayed their encounter in her mind, imagining what it would mean if their paths crossed again, whether it was foolish to feel the stirrings of attraction, whether she could allow herself to feel joy without guilt, and she realized how much Leo's quiet presence had reminded her of the strength and depth of her own heart, how his innocence and wisdom had opened a window to hope she had not allowed herself to see, and she imagined Samuel's voice, the softness in his tone, the laughter that once warmed her, and she felt her heart ache with a mixture of fear and excitement, unsure whether to let herself hope or to guard the fragile balance she had carefully maintained for years. Yet as night fell and the kitchen grew silent, she sat at the table with Leo once more, watching him eat quietly, and she felt the truth of his earlier words settle gently in her chest, that love does not leave, it only waits, and in that moment, Eleanor allowed herself to believe, just for a heartbeat, that perhaps love could return in new forms, in gentle touches, in shared glances, in the soft presence of someone who had been part of her past and now quietly reappeared. And as the moonlight streamed through the window, casting silver across the worn wooden floor, Eleanor felt a stirring she had not felt in years, a sense that her heart, though scarred and cautious, could still be touched, that even after sorrow, there could be laughter, connection, and the possibility of new love. And Leo, sensing the change, looked up at her with his dark eyes and offered a small, knowing smile, as if he understood the unspoken feelings brewing within her. And Eleanor, in that soft, quiet moment, realized that life had not finished surprising her, that the past and the present could coexist, and that even in the shadow of grief, the heart could open to warmth once more, a warmth that might begin slowly, tenderly, like a candle flickering to life in the dim corners of the soul, yet strong enough to illuminate the path ahead. And as she cleared the dishes and looked out the window at the stars beginning to shimmer in the night sky, Eleanor felt a cautious hope, a gentle excitement, and a thrilling curiosity about what tomorrow might bring, knowing that love, in its quiet, unassuming ways, had found a way back into her life, whispering that healing, connection, and even romance could return, all because of the wisdom of a child, the courage to remember, and the unexpected reappearance of someone who had once held her heart. And she allowed herself to smile, soft and small at first, then broader, a smile that carried the promise of new beginnings, as the house, once heavy with sorrow, now seemed lighter, filled with possibility. And Eleanor knew, deep down, that her story was far from over, that the quiet words at the kitchen table had planted seeds that would grow into something beautiful, something tender, something that could fill the empty spaces she had carried for so long. And she felt the slow, steady pulse of life and hope returning, weaving through the ordinary moments, preparing her heart for the changes to come. As the night settled softly around her, wrapping the house in a peaceful, expectant hush, days passed in a blur of ordinary routines and quiet reflection, yet Eleanor found herself noticing Samuel's presence more and more, small, seemingly casual encounters that made her heart race despite the calm she tried to maintain. And each time he appeared, whether at the market, the post office, or simply walking down the street with a basket of groceries, she felt an unexpected warmth, a mixture of nostalgia and curiosity, and it was impossible to ignore how familiar and comforting his presence felt, how effortlessly he could make her laugh or pause the restless spinning of her thoughts. And yet guilt shadowed these moments, a cautious voice reminding her of the love she had lost and the years she had spent alone, teaching herself that happiness could be fleeting and that hearts could be broken twice if not careful. Yet Samuel seemed to slip past that caution as naturally as sunlight through the window, and Eleanor found herself imagining conversations, touches, shared glances, the simple acts of connection that could mean everything. And all the while, Leo remained her quiet anchor, his perceptive little eyes noticing the subtle changes in her expressions, the way her smile lingered longer when Samuel spoke, the way her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted a tablecloth or carried plates, and one night, after an afternoon of errands, Eleanor returned home to find Leo waiting in the doorway, rubbing his eyes sleepily, and he climbed into the chair beside her at the kitchen table without a word, his presence gentle, patient, and quietly encouraging, and then, in the softest whisper, he said he liked Samuel because Eleanor smiled more when he was around, a simple statement that sent an unexpected jolt through her chest, catching her off guard with its truth and innocence, revealing what she had tried so hard to hide even from herself, and in that instant, Eleanor realized how much she had missed allowing herself to feel, how much life could still offer if she permitted her heart to soften, and over the following week, she noticed that even mundane tasks became imbued with subtle excitement. The thought of seeing Samuel bringing a thrill she hadn't felt in years, the way their conversations lingered in her mind, replaying phrases, glances, small jokes that seemed to carry more weight than they should, yet it all felt natural, unforced, as though time had paused and allowed them a second chance at the gentle warmth of companionship. And one evening, while preparing dinner together, Eleanor caught herself studying Samuel's face, seeing the lines formed by years of laughter and worry, the gray streaks in his hair that somehow made him look more distinguished, and she felt a strange combination of longing and caution, unsure if she was ready to embrace what was stirring inside her. And yet, as they spoke about trivial things, the weather, Leo's school, favorite books, the air between them vibrated with unspoken emotion, a shared understanding that words could not fully capture, a connection that was tender, slow, and real, and Eleanor found herself glancing toward Leo, whose presence seemed to silently approve, a reminder that the life she had built, the family she cherished, and the love she could still experience were not mutually exclusive. And late one night, after the house had settled into quiet, Eleanor sat at the kitchen table alone, the soft hum of the refrigerator filling the space, reflecting on the week, on Samuel, on Leo, on the fragile stirrings of hope in her heart, and she realized she was ready to face the vulnerability she had avoided, the thrill and fear of allowing herself to care again, to trust again, to love again in a way that acknowledged both the past and the possibilities of the present. And she thought of Thomas not with sorrow alone but with gratitude, remembering the joy and depth he had given her, realizing that letting someone new into her heart did not diminish that love. And then she felt a gentle knock on the door, Samuel standing there with a hesitant smile, holding a small bouquet of wildflowers, and the world seemed to pause as Eleanor took in the simple beauty of the moment, the way it encapsulated everything through fear, excitement, hope, and a quiet promise of connection. And as he stepped inside, placing the flowers on the table and offering his hand to hers, Eleanor felt the cautious flutter of anticipation, a mixture of nervousness and longing, and Leo, watching from his chair, smiled knowingly, as if sensing the change, the possibility of new love unfolding gently before them, and Eleanor realized in that instant that life had not abandoned her, that joy could return in unexpected ways, that hearts could heal and open again. And as they talked into the night, their laughter mingling with the soft ticking of the kitchen clock, Eleanor felt a lightness she had not experienced in years, the tension of grief and solitude easing slowly, leaving space for tenderness, excitement, and a connection that was patient yet powerful, subtle yet undeniable, a bond that promised not perfection, but presence, not certainty, but hope. And she finally understood that love, in its quiet, persistent way, could find her again, in moments small and ordinary, through gestures unassuming and words unspoken, that healing and affection could coexist, that the heart, no matter how cautious or scarred, could expand to embrace new beginnings. And as the night deepened, Eleanor allowed herself to linger at the kitchen table, the soft glow of the lamp illuminating Samuel's thoughtful expression and Leo's gentle smile, knowing that a new chapter was quietly beginning, one built on shared history, whispered feelings, and the patient unfolding of something tender, profound, and entirely possible, a chapter that promised warmth, understanding, and the gentle revival of her heart. While outside, the world carried on unaware, and inside, Eleanor discovered that the quiet words, the simple gestures, and the patient presence of those she loved could transform ordinary evenings into moments of lasting significance, leaving her heart open, hopeful, and ready for the love she had long thought lost. The days that followed felt different, As if the air in Eleanor's home had shifted, lighter and warmer, charged with quiet anticipation, and that evening, Samuel came by for dinner, holding a basket of fresh bread and vegetables, his smile tentative but genuine, and Eleanor felt a flutter in her chest she hadn't expected, a mixture of excitement and nervousness, as she greeted him at the door and invited him in, noticing how easily the space between them felt natural, how conversation flowed without effort, filled with laughter, shared memories, and gentle questions about Leo, who sat nearby, quietly observing the two adults, his small face reflecting curiosity, approval, and a hint of mischief, and Eleanor realized that this simple dinner, ordinary in appearance, held a deeper significance, a tender step toward rebuilding joy in her life, and as the evening wore on, Leo excused himself to fetch a dessert he had prepared earlier, leaving Eleanor and Samuel alone for a brief moment, and Samuel spoke softly, confessing that he did not want to rush or change anything, only to share the present with her, to offer companionship, understanding, and care, and Eleanor listened, her heart beating fast, feeling the truth in his words, the sincerity in his eyes, and the courage it took to speak them, and she realized how much she had longed for this, not a replacement for what she had lost, but a chance to feel alive again, to open her heart to warmth, laughter, and affection, to embrace life without fear of the past, and when Leo returned with the dessert, he placed it on the table and looked at them with a knowing smile, as if he understood that something new, delicate, and beautiful was unfolding before him, and Eleanor felt a rush of gratitude for the child who had helped her see the possibility of love again, the child who had reminded her that hearts could heal, that joy could return, that even after sorrow, life could surprise her with gentle, unexpected gifts, and as the night deepened, they spoke about memories long ago, hopes for the future, and small, everyday details, each word weaving a connection that was tender and real, a bond built on honesty, patience, and mutual respect, and Eleanor found herself laughing more freely than she had in years, feeling the heaviness of grief lift slightly, replaced by something light, bright, and alive, and when Samuel finally rose to leave, Eleanor walked him to the door, their hands brushing in a quiet, electrifying moment, a touch that spoke volumes without a single word, and outside, the evening air was cool, filled with the scent of flowers and the distant hum of life continuing on, while Eleanor's heart swelled with the promise of what could be, a gentle mixture of excitement, hope, and longing, and Leo, watching from the window, waved sleepily, whispering softly that he liked seeing Eleanor smile like that, words that lingered in her mind and filled her with warmth, and later, sitting alone at the kitchen table, Eleanor reflected on the journey she had taken, from the heaviness of loss to the fragile, delicate stirrings of love returned, realizing that healing was not a straight path, that grief and joy could coexist, that past and present could mingle, and that allowing herself to feel again was not betrayal but affirmation, a tribute to the life she had lived in, the life still unfolding, and she thought of Thomas, remembering him fondly without pain, seeing the love they shared as a foundation rather than a limitation, understanding that love could take many forms, that hearts could hold both memory and new beginnings. And as she cleared the table, she noticed the soft glow of the lamp reflecting in Samuel's thoughtful expression, the gentle smile on Leo's face, and felt a deep, serene happiness, knowing that life, in all its unexpected beauty, had given her a second chance, not just at love, but at connection, joy, and hope, and she allowed herself to embrace it fully, feeling the quiet strength and tenderness rising inside her, a readiness to explore this new chapter, to cherish it, to nurture it, and to let her heart, long cautious and careful, expand once more. And as Eleanor turned off the lights and walked to her bedroom, she carried with her the soft, enduring promise that love, in its quiet and persistent way, had returned to her life, guided by the innocence and insight of a child, the courage of a man who cared, and the resilience of her own heart, a promise that whispered through every moment, every smile, every small gesture, reminding her that even after sorrow, even after heartbreak, life could still be tender, full, and beautifully alive, and that the kitchen table, once a place of solitude, had become a place of hope, connection, and the gentle unfolding of something extraordinary, something she had thought might never return, and Eleanor knew in her soul that this was only the beginning, that the quiet words, the shared laughter, the soft glances, and the patient unfolding of trust and affection would continue to shape her days, slowly, deliberately, beautifully, as love found its place in her heart again, steady, gentle, and enduring.